Telling the difference between transparent and invisible is an acquired skill. Until you've practiced, you can't make the choice between looking through and looking at. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is the 30/1 resolution, which was co-sponsored by Sri Lanka on the 1st of October 2015. What we know already is the fact is that Sri Lanka has articulated and reiterated its position, stating that it will withdraw from the co-sponsored resolution, which was co-sponsored by Sri Lanka, United Kingdom, Macedonia, as well as Montenegro. The reason? Citing the travel ban imposed on Army Commander and Chief of Defence Staff Shavendra Silva and his family. Where do we stand at present? We know that Dinesh Gunawardena, Minister of External Affairs, along with Minister Mahinda Samarsinghe, who was the former Human Rights Minister of the then government, that is Mahinda Rajapaksa's regime, is already in Geneva, along with Foreign Secretary Ravinatha Arya-Singhe. There is no permanent representative in Geneva representing Sri Lanka at present, so that is also news for us. So let's start off tonight's show with the three guests who are in our studios this evening. Let me quickly introduce them to you. Joining us tonight on the show is Malin Selvaratne, journalist. All joining us tonight on the show is Sudarshan Gunawardena, attorney at law, and also Shamendra Ferdinando, journalist. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening on the show tonight on Face the Nation. Let's start off tonight's show with Sudarshan Gunawardena, attorney at law, also former advisor to the Prime Minister, that was Ranil Wickremesinghe. Sudarshan, was this news to you when you heard that the travel ban imposed by the United States has led to the withdrawal of Sri Lanka withdrawing completely from the US-sponsored resolution?
Well, given by the statements when the present government was in the opposition, it was to be expected at one point or another that they would depart from the position taken by the previous government. So I'm not quite sure whether that the particular decision on travel ban resulted this reaction, or whether it was a premeditated. But anyway, I thought that it was natural for this government, given the mandate they got and also the platform they campaign on, they would try to distance themselves from the resolution.
Sudarshan, do you think that the government took this decision to make it sound like a patriotic government, which is supporting the masses and also the rural people's ambitions as far as reconciliation is concerned?
Yeah, it looks like, because that given the fact that the present president actually got elected with a majority, but when you take the minorities in this country are concerned, that the huge majority of the minorities voted for the defeated candidate, Mr. Premadasa. And President Rajapaksa scored mainly from the majority. So there was a sentiment earlier to say that, you know, whatever reconciliation efforts that last government started was kind of a betrayal, unpatriotic, so on and so forth. So therefore, maybe they could use this to build a campaign for their parliamentary election, and I think they will bank on that. So that must be. But I think there's another dimension to this position, because President Rajapaksa, when the President Mahinda Rajapaksa's government, they had a different approach towards this whole accountability and reconciliation issues. Their government refused to take part or collaborate with the Human Rights Council resolution sponsored by the US and like-minded governments. So 2012, they were asked to actually come on board. They refused. So I think they are going back to their original position. So I don't see any contradiction as far as this government is concerned.
Thank you very much, Sudarshan Gunawardena, attorney at law and also a former advisor to then Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Thank you very much, Sudarshan, for joining us this evening on the show. Also joining us tonight on the show is Malinda Senaratna, journalist, as well as Shamindra Fernando, also sitting in tonight on the show as a journalist. So let's go to Shamindra Fernando, journalist. Shamindra, you've been following the developments with regard to the 30/1 resolution for some time now. What is your position with regard to the latest development on this?
Shamir, actually, in terms of the decisions taken in Geneva, the Western powers started taking action against our armed forces some time back. Actually, long before Lieutenant General Shavindra Silla was issued with a ban, travel ban, they prevented Field Marshal Fonseca from accompanying the former President Maithripala Sirisena to the US twice, at least twice. And the Australians refused visa to retired Major General Chagi Galagi. And the UN also caused problems to Sri Lankan peacekeepers deployed in various parts of the world. So thanks to the UNP signing, co-sponsoring the resolution in Geneva in October 2015, our armed forces and the country face severe problems. So I don't think it's correct to say that the government acted because the army commander was issued with this travel ban. But when you take overall, in terms of the Geneva resolutions, the Western powers took a series of actions against Sri Lanka over the past 4 years.
Do you think this is another election gimmick as far as this government is concerned, to win over some votes?
Shamir, I believe without announcing that we were going to leave Geneva resolution, we should have first discussed the issue with America and other countries and convince them that this allegation as regards killing of 40,000 Tamil civilians is not true. We should have done that before making this announcement.
Thank you very much, Shamindra Fernando, journalist. Also joining us tonight on the show as a journalist is Malinda Senaratna. Malinda, what is your position with regard to the latest developments that have taken place? The Sri Lankan government categorically stating that they want to withdraw from the US-sponsored resolution because of the travel ban imposed on the army commander and his family.
I think that there was a problem with the resolution in the first instance because it contained we agreed to things that she cannot implement without amending the constitution. So you can't cite some agreement and come back to parliament and say we have agreed to this, now can we change the laws? So that's putting the cart before the horse. I'm in agreement with, to an extent, with what Shamindra said. So there are many, we need to get closure on this whole 30/1 and this human rights allegations business. That is not going anywhere, that's not helping anyone. Now, how to do that? There can be many ways. One is what Shamindra proposed. Maybe that is, I don't know, I'm not a diplomat, I don't know how these things work out in that universe. But to discuss with the key actors. Now, US didn't sponsor this, you mentioned UK, Macedonia and Montenegro. But it was obviously that we always refer to it as the US sponsored thing. But that's what they did. They were moving, they were the movers and shakers. So you talk with them, with the UK and whoever other interested parties are, and try to come to an agreement about how to go forward, because we've stopped, right? That said, now this business of the army commander's travel ban and connecting it with the decision to withdraw from the co-sponsorship, I don't know whether that is the reason, but if that is the reason, I think that's just two different things. You are opposed, I would be opposed to the 30/1 on the merits of the document, not because someone was denied entry visa to the United States or elsewhere. I think that's a separate thing, and that has to be that is related to SOFA, the status of forces agreement that the United States wants us to come into, a US Sri Lanka agreement about US soldiers being allowed to camp out here. that can be related to whether we sign that or not. We can cite the army commander's travel ban as an issue which is going to cause problems. But that the travel ban has no relationship. I think it's hard to draw a line and say because of this we should do that. Because there are far more cogent arguments against 30/1 than the army commander not being allowed to go to New York or something like that.
Thank you very much, Malin Selvanathan, journalist. We now open the floor for questions from our journalists. On to my immediate left is Nadeem Majid, and on to my far left is Farah Shaukat Ali. Let's start off with Nadeem.
Thank you, Shamir. Malinda, you raised an important point there about the tying in of the travel ban or the denial of visa to enter US to Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva, the Army Commander, and 30/1. You mentioned that actually more ties in with the proposed status of forces agreement. But do you feel that for this government at present, that the US's ban on travel for Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva has given the government an easy cop-out for any dealings when it comes to dealings with the United States?
Of course, for any dealings with the United States, the US has taken everyone for a ride. They are not interested in human rights, they are not interested in human beings, right? They are interested in their interests, which I'm fine with. Countries have their own interests. If their interest here right now is trying to, shove out the Chinese and get in their foot into the door or something like that, whatever it takes, that's what they will do, and that's what they have done throughout their history all over the world, right? So if we don't like that, we can use this most definitely to say, okay, you're saying you want a status of forces agreement, right? You want to have your soldiers here and they are law unto themselves. They will not come under jurisdiction of our courts. They will have to be answerable to the US courts. So you get Private Benjamin coming here and giving the finger to our army command, and we can do nothing about it. While you stop our army commander from coming there, there's some imbalance that is pretty ugly, right? So that can be used as an argument, but that is against USA. But we are talking here about this 30/1, which is with the United Nations Human Rights Commission, and that's two different things.
Also.
Of course, you can argue that the UN is a creature of the United States. That's a different matter. But let us not forget that the United States called the UNHRC a cesspool of bias, And at the same time, we've had the incumbent ambassador telling our Sambandhan, I saw a couple of years ago, I think last year, 2019, saying that they're pushing for resolution, the clauses in resolution 30/1 to be implemented. That resolution is born in the cesspool of bias. What are you talking about? Are they serious about these things?
Would you say that resolution 30/1, when you look at the institutions that it has established already, while some measures, as you mentioned, require constitutional amendments, being one of the things, especially with this proposal of hybrid courts, there are other measures that have been implemented as a result of 30/1, including, for example, the Office of Missing Persons Act. When you look at the work that the Office of Missing Persons has been doing, and other engines of the reconciliation mechanism in Sri Lanka, would you say that on the whole, the work that has been done thus far under 30/1 has been detrimental to, or has advanced the cause of reconciliation in Sri Lanka?
No, overall it has left a bad bad taste in the mouth. I'm not saying throw the baby with the bathwater, that's what you're trying to get at. Right now, Office of Missing Persons, that kind of mechanism can be useful in an as an interim kind of measure. Now, for example, if you say the legal system is slow, the court system, the judicial system is slow, or there are some things we have to fix, and we can't wait for all of those things to be fixed, and therefore we have the FCID, or we have presidential commissions. I can understand that as an interim measure, but the moment you recognize that the system you have is flawed, the first thing you have to do while you have all those things happening is to fix the system. If the laws are not right, you amend the laws. If the system has flaws, you fix the flaws. But you can't replace have these things as permanent fixtures of your overall system. Office of Missing Persons, I mean, you have certain legal
You're saying there should be a sunset clause on it?
Huh?
That there should be a sunset clause, that it should have had a time frame rather than
it should
being
have a
permanent.
time frame, because you can't have these things going on forever, because okay, right, you finish that, then what happens if there's another, say, insurrection? 5 years down, you're going to have another Office of Missing Persons, or you're going to have this as a permanent thing and no one takes notice of it. But you have to have robust laws, and you have a system that can uphold those laws.
And 30-1 was not going to deliver this
30-1 came with so much crap that that shadow is there on everything associated with 30-1. So everyone is like questioning. Not everyone.
Thanks, Malind. Sudarshan, I'd like to come to you on that note actually, on 30-1 and whether the work that has been done over the past 5 years since the passage of 30-1, whether it has been beneficial or detrimental. I'm specifically asking you in the context of not only your work within the government in the past few years, but also your work as a rights advocate before that through Rights
Yes.
Now.
Thank you. In my view, it's a glass half full situation. 30-1 has agreed to certain measures, and actually the resolution basically said, okay, there are 2-year period. But now actually after this second resolution 34/1 and the 40/1, so we have time until March 2021, that is 6-year period. Actually Sri Lanka will be discussed properly on March 2021, not this time. This time there will be a report and follow-up discussion. So resolution basically came as a consensus resolution because Sri Lankan foreign minister, who actually backed by 2/3 parliamentary majority, went there and said that we as a nation will have a national mechanism to address these issues.
And this was,
So
you say it was backed by a 2/3 parliamentary
majority, yes, 2/3 majority.
But this is the question, right? I mean, immediately after the foreign minister at the time, Minister Mangala Samarira, came back, there were celebrations, there were posters that had been put up even celebrating the president for his role in saving the country from the persecution of the international community. Then you had all of these mixed messaging, let's say, because shortly afterwards, elements within the government itself were opposing this resolution, which you say
Obviously.
was backed by a 2/3
No, that's
majority.
true. I mean, basically,
Why do you say 2/3?
2/3 majority, because this government, in the parliamentary election in August 2015,
August
the
17th,
UNP
the
got
17th of
the-
August.
Huh?
17th of August.
17th of August, yeah. So UNP got the majority, and UNP and SLFP signed an agreement, and because of that agreement, actually they together commanded 2/3 majority in the parliament.
Hence,
That's a technicality.
No,
Because the majority of the members of the SLFP didn't support the government and sat in opposition.
Obviously, that's right. There was a joint opposition group who was sitting in the opposition. But overall, the government managed to get 2/3 majority
But
in parliament.
But it's
in
very
various-
similar to saying that, you know, the 19th Amendment was also passed with a 2/3 majority, and now all of the MPs, or a majority of the MPs who helped to pass that 19th Amendment, are now complaining about the 19th
No, no,
Amendment.
that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
But
At that
Sudarshan, I just
one
want to interrupt you for a
particular
second here.
yeah.
There was no 2/3 majority sought in Parliament with regard to the 30/1 resolution.
exactly.
No, there was no. What
So
I
when you
said
say-
was
when
what
you
I
say,
said.
you're implying
No,
that
what I said
the
was
there was a 2/3 majority in terms
no.
of
I think
30/1 resolution.
what I said was that there was a government, which a consensus national government, which has a 2/3 majority in the parliament, went there, and that foreign minister.
No, but there was technically if you're talking about two-thirds majority, it has to be passed through a two-thirds majority. Example, the 19th Amendment of the Constitution, Nadeem,
No.
had a two-thirds majority
No,
in Parliament.
well, let's
So
let, let,
what
let,
you're
let's
implying
say-
right now is saying
Oh, okay,
there was a majority, so
No, no.
henceforth we
But
went
he
into
didn't have a
condition
mandate
accordingly.
to sign something
No,
to change our laws.
It
let
doesn't
me
happen like that,
No,
Sudarshan.
I think so. Okay, let me just because now there are a couple of questions.
Right.
One, okay.
No, my question is very simple to
Let's
you.
forget about the two-thirds majority.
You said so. You are
Okay,
withdrawing the
let's
statement
forget about
right now.
two-thirds.
Okay, so
Okay,
you're withdrawing
there's
the
a
statement.
government in power
Right. Okay.
with a majority, which actually came into power with two consecutive mandates: presidential election 2015 January and also 2015 August parliamentary election, and that government actually had the support of section of the opposition. So that foreign minister went there and basically said, we are ready to, have our own national mechanism. And that was said in a backdrop of impending international investigation on Sri Lanka. So we had, this resolution did not come from nowhere. There was a history to that.
Yeah, but
And we are, if we are trying,
how the UN system works is
Yeah.
if there is an impending investigation that has to be brought forward by a respective body against a government, it has to first go to the UN Security Council. If it's vetoed at the UN Security Council, it has to go through to the United Nations General Assembly.
That's a wrong interpretation. There are two kind of investigations. You are referring to a criminal investigation. A criminal investigation has to start from, that matter has to be referred to the ICC, that is International Criminal Court. There you need the Security Council approval. But here what we are talking about is UN Human Rights Council has mandated an international investigation on Sri Lanka, that is a human rights investigation. In 2014, when the Rajapaksa under the Rajapaksa presidency, the UN Human Rights Council has voted a resolution on Sri Lanka saying that, and the resolution asked the High Commissioner's office to start an investigation. And that investigation was called the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights investigation on Sri Lanka. So that investigation was there, and the report was due on 2015 March. So because the foreign minister went there and asked for a deferral, they deferred it for the September session. And September, there was a report. A report produced, okay, it's an ex parte report because Sri Lanka government did not participate in that discussion, but that report was there. If Sri Lankan government at that point did not intervene, then there would have been another resolution without Sri Lanka's participation, and possibly they are going to adopt the resolution, and that resolution would mandate to an international human rights investigation. It's not the criminal investigation, ICC investigation. So therefore, that was the situation. So we can't just
But at that
take
time,
things.
at that time, if you recollect right, Sudarshana,
Yeah.
it was all about taking the Rajapaksa regime to the electric chair. It was talk about
That's right.
an
That's
investigation,
right.
so on and so
Exactly. I mean, that whole election campaign was fought by Rajapaksa government saying that there is impending electric chair. So then nobody was sent to electric chair because that government actually managed to manage the situation.
Shamindra, with regard to what Sudarshan is saying right now about the investigation, and it was their government who Sudarshan was an advisor to the Prime Minister at that time, Ranil Wickremesinghe, saying that all decisions were taken to make sure or ensure that the Rajapaksa family is safeguarded from the electric chair. So are you in agreement with that statement?
Shamir, actually the original plan was to bring this resolution in 2010. If General Fonseca won the 2010 election, if he was appointed the president, they could have brought this in 2010. Right? That was the idea, because it's the whole thing, Shamir, is political. You see, in 2010, they had the UNP, the JVP, the TNA and the SLMC backing Fonseca. Then 2015, we had the same team backing Maithripala Sirisena. 2019 too, the same team. Of course, the JVP decided against that, right? So it's the same team. They created this situation for foreign intervention in this country. That's number one. And I must also tell you, Ravinath Arya Singh, who was our permanent representative in Geneva in 2015, he opposed this draft resolution, but the UMP government ordered him to accept it. Now, this is a document issued by the Foreign Ministry on that day. This particular meeting was held on 21st of September 2015 with the participation of Americans, the British and the other members of the team, where Ravinath Aryasinghe, as our permanent representative, very clearly he said, you should not do this, we are against it. But the former foreign minister ordered him to accept it, and Ravinath Aryasinghe, the same person who opposed it, was forced to accept it on 1st of October 2015. Right? In 2017, subsequently, through a cabinet paper, the Prime Minister set up a special team under the late Mano Tirthawala, right? By creating a special unit here, the orders were issued to Geneva through late Mr. Mano Tirthawala, right? You can check this. It was Mano Tirthawala who directed, instructed the former PR to extend the resolution. So the UMP did, took measures in agreement with the US to undermine Sri Lanka. That's the truth. And in the presence of Prasad Karyavasam, who is the advisor to the speaker now, Jaffna District MP Sumandiran, he said the government of Sri Lanka, the US and the TNA have reached agreement on foreign judges. It was said in Washington. And the UMP fully cooperated
you
with
take
this.
responsibility for the statements that you're making right now, because you're making
All the
reference
documents are with me.
Yeah, you're making
You can have
reference to individuals who are not present here
Definitely.
today.
I take responsibility. Yes.
Swaraj, yes.
Shamindra Ferdinando, what are the consequences of withdrawal from this co-sponsorship? What do you envisage?
For us, Foreign Relations Minister Dinesh Gunawardena announced that we would withdraw from 40/1. But we cannot do that without reaching an agreement with the Geneva Council. You cannot, right? So the statement made by the government in Parliament and outside Parliament, is irrelevant, because you cannot do anything without getting the agreement. So that's why at the onset I pointed out that they should have first discussed this issue with the Americans, the British, the Canadians and the Germans before taking this step.
So are you saying that their statement that they are withdrawing from this and so on, including the president saying the same thing, is like a political gimmick?
I cannot say that, but you cannot withdraw because you are there. You are there. You simply cannot make a statement and say that we are out. Right? Now we must realize. Malinda, you said about SOFA and the action taken against the army commander. Specific actions were taken against Field Marshal Fonseca, Lieutenant General Shavindra Silva and Major General Chagigalage on the basis of the Geneva resolution and the Darusman report. It's nothing to do with SOFA. Nothing to do with SOFA or AXA. AXA, of course, for us, the former President Maithripala Sirisena, in early October 2017, agreed to AXA. We have already signed AXA.
But Shavindra, isn't it surprising to note that usually the United States government, which would swiftly react to a statement made by the Prime Minister himself, Mahinda Rajapaksa, with regard to the withdrawal of 30/1 resolution, is mum on this? Is it because the US commitment to the UN sessions in Geneva has been withdrawn after a new administration came into power under Donald Trump?
No, definitely not. Because, Shamir, although the US is not in the Geneva Council, the US interests are represented by the UK. And they have a huge political partnership, and although US, we must realize the US withdrew from Geneva because US felt Geneva was causing issues to Israel. So that's a different issue. But on this Sri Lankan thing, the US is fully cooperating, with UK, right? So just because they are not there, I mean, it does not mean that the US will keep away.
So
They
you
are
would
fully
say
involved.
that the US will react to the statement made by Ravinath Arisinghe at the UN sessions in Geneva, stating categorically that they will withdraw from 30/1 resolution will be taken up by the US government in time to come?
Faraz, actually, I feel the US knew what we were going to do. That's why they issued this travel warning in respect of the Army Command. They knew. They knew.
Sudarshana, Sudarshana, you actually didn't, on the first question that I asked you, whether you feel that the work that has been done as a result of passing 30/1, in that with the extensions of the time period and all, do you feel, when you look at that, the work that has been done through the OMP, the Secretariat for Coordinating Reconciliation Mechanisms, which was headed by the late Mr. Manu Titawela, has that advanced the cause of reconciliation in Sri Lanka?
I feel that it has advanced because for the first time there was a kind of agreement between different communities to have a one unified reconciliation process. Prior to that, even though the previous government, that is Rajapaksa government, appointed LLRC, Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, but a sizable section of the Tamil political society as well as the human rights society did not cooperate with them, did not accept the commission. This time, with the resolution and also the follow-up action by the Sri Lankan government by establishing the Secretariat to Coordinate Reconciliation Mechanisms led by late Manu Titawela, and also the reconciliation institutions or the transitional justice institutions like Office of the Missing Persons and the Office of Reparations actually helped. But it was praised by the Human High Commissioner as well. But what the position was that there's a progress, but it's a slow progress.
So Sudarshana, one of the most important things with reconciliation, Sri Lanka at the end of the day is a democracy, and you need to have public buy-in. If the public are not bought into it, if it is not in line with the public will, then it is doomed to failure.
That's true.
And the reality is that whilst there were those in government and those in the international community and those in Geneva who were making decisions based on resolution, or to advance this, to adopt this resolution and then to establish these mechanisms and these processes in Sri Lanka, isn't it the reality that these mechanisms failed to win the praise of the people or failed to be endorsed by the people?
Well, I agree with you to a certain extent. 2015, that's why my position was 2015, there was an elected government which claimed that we are going to do this. And then there was no reason to disbelieve that. That government was elected by popular vote. And that government took a position, a policy decision that, okay, we will have our own national reconciliation mechanisms. And that was accepted. And I don't agree with Malinda's position that the agreements were contrary to the constitutional provisions. We can argue on that.
So you're saying 30
I'm saying 30/1 has no inconsistency with the constitutional provisions, because there was no agreement on foreign judges. If you look at the text, it says a mechanism with the participation of foreign and Commonwealth prosecutors, investigators, defense lawyers and judges. But it has no agreement or no mentioning about setting up a hybrid court or something that was used to.
No, Sudarshan, you're wrong. Then why did Tilak Maharappana go to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva and say that they are not for setting up a hybrid court?
No, he said it. No.
He said it because that there was this whole misconception. But if you look at the text of the
foreign minister of Sri Lanka went to the UN.
He's the
sessions
former
in
Attorney
Geneva
General also.
Based on a misconception, goes and makes a statement at the UN sessions in Geneva. Is that what you're saying?
No. My point is that you have to take the text of the resolution. And resolution
but
never
said,
discussed.
The resolution doesn't say specifically hybrid court, but it does say
it says participation subject to interpretation. So
well,
then, if
how would a foreign judge participate in a process here if he's not going to be judging?
That's where the constitution will come into play. Now you have to create a institution by by bringing a Act of Parliament. That's the way we brought in the Office of Missing Persons, Office of Reparations. And that draft, after passed by the Cabinet, will be gazetted, and then it will be referred to the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court will look at the constitutionality. So if any provision, I mean, whatever you say, foreign, international law, hybrid, whatever the provision, that it has to be consistent with the constitutional provision.
But do you agree, Sudarshan, if I say that the Office of the Missing Persons Act was brought to the Parliament haphazardly, just a month away from the UN sessions, which was supposed to be brought to the table in September?
I think because there was a delay.
No, but it was brought haphazardly. Do you agree with that?
Because that as a result of delay, that they
and
wanted
such action
something.
was taken.
They wanted
to
something to
please
show
the whim and fancy of the international community.
No, I don't agree with that, because the Office of the Missing Persons, the recommendation to set up some permanent body to look at the missing persons was a recommendation of the LLRC Commission. LLRC is not an international commission. It's a local commission appointed by President Mahinda Rajapaksa. And our own former Attorney General, late Mr. C.R. De Silva, was the chairman of that commission. It's a completely local commission. And that commission recommended a permanent institution is needed to address the missing persons issue. So if you can, I mean, you have to just
I don't think they recommended a permanent.
They
recommended, among the recommendation was that one, to have some mechanism to deal with that.
Deal with that. I mean, that because
you can have that kind of
office,
but Sudarshan, you can have that kind of you don't have to change laws for each and everything.
Yeah.
You can have certain mechanisms put in place using the existing laws. Now, what the objection here is that Mangala Samaraweera, because he is scared about, as you said, about repercussions.
Yeah.
You give something, get something, that kind of thing. You are playing that kind of game, but then you, as Najib said, you don't have to say the word to mean it, right? You can have the content which put together gives you that word, hybrid. Just like Sumandiram talks about doesn't talk about federalism, but tells we can do it without using the word. Same thing. So, but why would he go when there's lack of clarity on the constitutionality of it, and go there and agree to that to some mechanism where he has to go through a huge process to make it legal?
No, I mean, you have to just take the context into consideration.
But we can't have the context.
Let me just take what Shaminder said, that the present Secretary to the Foreign Ministry, Ravinatha Arising, who was the permanent representative at that point, objected to the draft, which is true, because there were 3 informal sessions. At the second informal, this draft was presented, and Sri Lanka actually backed down. Sri Lanka backed out. And I was in Brussels at that point, and I actually travelled to Geneva during the resolution discussion. So I know that. But then there were political discussion. The government in power thought that we have to have some kind of agreement. So the government asked the ambassador to go ahead, right? I mean, imagine now situation. Okay, imagine the situation, ambassador there saying that we should not withdraw from the resolution. But government has made a decision. And government decision, the political decision has to be accepted by the ambassador. I mean, that is there.
No, we are not arguing on that.
No. Since this was brought in, I have to just say that. Yeah. So, see, my whole point is that government thought that they had a mandate, and there was a mandate, and that they negotiated because there was a situation that Sri Lanka was in an international isolation. And they thought the best way to get away from that isolation and also get away from this all these threats is to work with the international community.
Is to submit.
Well, I mean, that's your interpretation. So I don't say submit, but it's a kind of understanding. But then, at that point, our judiciary, there were various allegations about the Sri Lankan judiciary. Our own Chief Justice was impeached by the whims of the executive, and the legislature just submitted to that. And the independence of judiciary was very much challenged. So at that point, it's difficult to argue that we have an independent judiciary. But now, after 3-4 years, we can argue that our independence of our judiciary has been strengthened. So now we can renegotiate certain clauses and things. So there were some negotiations. There had been 3 consecutive resolutions passed on Sri Lanka, which Sri Lankan government, the earlier government, did not agree. That I can understand. No sovereign government can easily agree with that. But they did not negotiate. They said, well, their position was, this is a domestic affair. No foreign government can interfere. So there should not be a resolution. But what the US and like-minded government, the core group did, actually they brought the resolution in 2012. And Sri Lankan government, they worked with various partners, but they could not stop the resolution coming into force. This happened in 12, 13 and 14. So 15, what the government did was to actually stop that process being aggravated. So now we can agree.
Sudarshana,
Yeah.
you must also explain,
Yes.
if they are so worried about our human rights and all these issues, why on earth the US Embassy in Colombo instructed Sambandhan to vote for Fonseca? Just can you tell me that? Now his army was accused of killing 40,000, no, he was accused of raping Tamil women. And
Well,
but no, simple thing. Just tell me. Can you explain why Sambandhan was instructed by the U.S. Embassy in Colombo to support Fonseca, and why did Tamil people living in north and east vote for him? Because he won all districts. Because at the end of the day, the Tamils realized that they were saved by the Sri Lankan army. That's the truth. And talking about foreign judges, there was a report issued by Manori Muttetwagama. It included Dr. Pakesoti Saravanamuttu, my good friend Gamini Viyangoda, a number of other people. I think there were 10 people. They recommended foreign judges, and they handed over the report to Mrs. Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumartunga. You were also there at that time.
Yes.
Yeah. So on that basis, Sumandiran made a statement in Washington that there was an agreement among the US, Mr. Vikram Singhe's government, and the TNA for foreign judges. That's the truth.
Let me just
That's the
come
truth.
into this question, because now I don't know.
First answer the Sarath Fonseca
Sarath
question.
Fonseca, so I don't know actually whether the US government or US embassy has instructed the Tamil National Alliance, or whether Tamil National Alliance accepted. Tamil National Alliance is an accepted political party in Sri Lanka, and they can make their own decisions.
Can you explain how did Fonseca win Jaffna? How did Fonseca win Mulattu?
TNA decided
You need to give an opportunity to Sudarshan to respond.
Yeah,
I have a counter question to you, Samindra.
Yeah, TNA has decided to actually campaign against the government. So then the TNA was also part of the, officially or unofficially, part of the opposition coalition. So that's their political decision. I don't think that you can bring that into. I don't see there's any point. And then 2015, what happened was that TNA, JVP, and all these forces worked together to bring the common candidate, Sirisena, Maithripala Sirisena, to the presidency. And that government, they had a policy, and that policy they tried to implement. And mainly because of that resolution and also the follow-up activities, we actually won certain kind of international goodwill, especially
So
the
what
GSP
did
Plus.
the goodwill deliver to us?
GSP Plus.
Yeah.
GSP Plus was actually, during Rajapaksa's time, GSP Plus was suspended, and actually it was terminated. And all this time, Professor GLP said, no, we will get it back. But GSP Plus is a European Union instrument that gives a country, a third country, to duty-free access to some 6,000 plus goods. So that facility was actually restored, because that Sri Lanka
Why
was
did they
seen
remove?
Sorry?
Why did they remove it?
Removed because that Sri Lanka is seen as a country actually respecting and protecting human rights.
Right, thank you very much.
Sudarshan, as the former Director General of the Government Information Department, I will pose this question, because you always notice that when it comes to politicians talking about the Human Rights Council resolutions in Geneva and why it's important, and what will happen if the international community comes after us. They always talk about the withdrawal of GSP Plus and how industries will collapse because of it. I think that, don't you feel that therein lies the problem? Because the focus of the government was more on recovering GSP Plus than in actually convincing the people that we needed a reconciliation mechanism.
Yeah, no, I agree that there was a failure in convincing people on the importance of reconciliation. But it goes both ways.
Because the thing is, if you look at reconciliation in Sri Lanka in the past 5 years, you said that there has been some important work that has been done. But in spite of having all of these instruments in place, like the Office for the Secretariat for Coordinating Reconciliation Mechanisms, there was the Office for National Unity and Reconciliation, which was headed by former President Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga. And in spite of all of these measures, it seems that reconciliation is still far, far away, because we do see flare-ups. We see those flare-ups, a series of flare-ups eventually resulting in outright violence. We've seen incidents that happened in Digana, in Dintot, and then later on, post-Easter Sunday attacks, we saw incidents that happened in
And we also saw Easter Sunday attacks.
We also saw the Easter Sunday attacks.
And we saw Marvin It's not just a reaction.
Exactly. But you've seen, in spite of having all of these instruments in place, the goodwill, coexistence and harmony amongst communities in Sri Lanka doesn't seem to be progressing. So in which case, that would lead one to conclude that Resolution 30/1 and its implementation has failed.
No, I think it's an unfair conclusion, in my view, that we have.
But the evidence shows that division.
We have come along.
But the evidence shows that division has been exacerbated.
No. I don't see. I mean, I think actually there is a unity in this country. As far as I don't credit to one government, because I think after the war, both governments worked hard, at least to make sure that there's a reconciliation. Even Rajapaksa government, they held the provincial council election in the north. They released land. They also have started various reconciliation mechanisms. So this government took a further step. So even you mentioned various incidents, that's true, but reconciliation generally helped this country, and there is a more feeling of oneness, one nation feeling is there. There are setbacks, but I think that we have progress as a country. I think we have to also be proud of that as a country, as a Sri Lanka, we have progress. So there are various. So my point is that two different positioning. That one position was taken by the Japana government, but not supported wholly by all its partners. That's why the communication was a problem, because there were no champion for the reconciliation process within the government. Nobody actually took it seriously.
That's why the Foreign Minister Mangala Samayura is not a good enough champion?
I mean, one minister is not good enough, because government will have to speak in one voice. That was not the case. But anyway...
So the thing is, this is where the contradiction arises again, right? Because you did say that this was brought in with the support of the government,
yes,
which had a majority in parliament.
Yeah.
But the fact that there was no champion for it beyond the solitary minister shows that it didn't have support.
The problem is that, there's nobody, that there was such a campaign against, because then there's a backdrop, because there was a 30-year-long war, and the single society basically felt that,
Exactly, it was such a
Nothing.
toxic...
We need to
Sorry,
stop.
Malik.
We need to give Malik also an opportunity and all Shamindra.
I want to support
Yes.
Sudarshan on this, because processes take time, right? When you say there's things got worse, sometimes the division has been exaggerated, right? So then you come to all kinds of conclusions.
Yes.
Now, of course, there was the context. I think Mangal Samayura acted largely on his own steam, and the Prime Minister, the President of that time.
I don't think so.
Whatever. But he was the one champion, and he was not the Prime Minister nor the President, right? So he went and did whatever. The government went and signed this agreement, which was not mandated to. They didn't talk about such an agreement. They talked about reconciliation, but what is reconciliation? It can mean 10 different things to 10 different people. So you can't just say we did this and we got a mandate at the election, two successive elections for reconciliation, and that is your version of reconciliation. That you may believe that that's going to work, but according to what Sudarshan has been saying, it is not so much about reconciliation as you said, Nadeem, but it's about getting the GSP plus back. I think one of the things we exaggerated during the Yapalna time or overestimated was what the US and the West could do. Immediately after Brexit, Ranil Wickremesinghe, the great economic expert, has said, we are going to look east. Didn't he know that China and Japan owe the debt of North America and Europe? How were they going to? Of course, the US is our main trade partner and all that, but we were not going to collapse just because they tighten the screws on us. That's not going to happen. That would not have happened. Or you can take a stand that, okay, don't do this to us. We are a sovereign nation. Treat us with respect. Of course, we don't have nuclear arms and stuff like that to have a fight with you. But that does not mean that we have to be treated as though we are pieces of dirt, in the kitchen or something like that.
Shaminder?
Can I add something? No. So, Malinda, all of us know that the resolution was forced on us. I don't see a big difference between the Indo-Sri Lanka Accord and this, right? This was forced on us by the Western powers. That's number one. And the whole idea was not to punish the Sri Lankan armed forces. On the basis of this process, I'm sure Sudarshan is fully aware, Geneva directed us to divide this country, right? They demanded a new constitution. See, the previous government transformed the parliament to a constituent assembly and established 6 separate committees headed by 6 people, and the joint opposition was also brought in, right? Except Vimal Veeravansa's party, all the others cooperated with this operation, right? So why? I mean, if the Sri Lankan army committed crimes, whatever we did, why on earth Geneva direct the Sri Lankan government to bring in a new constitution? There cannot be any connection, right? I mean, ask your leaders, because the Prime Minister himself headed that thing.
Yeah, so what's wrong with that?
I mean,
wrong. What's wrong with that?
Can you explain why?
No.
Can you explain why Geneva gets involved?
It's not Geneva, Shamindra. I think you are completely misleading this situation.
In June 2016, they issued a statement, and the previous government agreed to bring in the new constitution.
No,
by early 2017.
Previous government actually came on a election promise to abolish the executive presidency. That was a promise given to the local electorate, and that based on that platform, that previous government won the presidential election against the all-powerful Mahinda Rajapaksa.
But that was nothing about a new constitution.
But to abolish executive presidency,
you don't need
try
the constitution.
No. Let me. To abolish executive presidency, that it was clear that under the present constitution, you can't abolish the executive presidency unless you go for a referendum.
But again, I mean, you said that there was a majority support from the public.
Give an opportunity to Shamindra and Malinda as well. So we've been speaking to Sudarshan a lot tonight on the show. So Shamindra, the counter argument that I'm going to bring forward with regard to Sarath Fonseca's argument that you brought forward to Sudarshana about how the US told the Tamil National Alliance to vote in favor of Sarath Fonseca. To that, bring a counter argument. Why is it that the US was silent, if that's the case, on the issue of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa contesting the elections, if he was the man behind the war crimes? That's what the US has been repeatedly saying. Then why was the US silent on that?
Actually, in 2010 January, then US ambassador in Colombo, Patricia Butenis, right? She identified 4 persons, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Army Commander Fonseca and Basil Rajapaksa as war criminals. The US identified all of them. Basil Rajapaksa remains a US citizen, right? The US did not interfere with Gotabaya Rajapaksa's campaign, right? Mahinda Rajapaksa is the Prime Minister and US backed Sarath Fonseca in 2010, right?
But that's a very an argument that is in favor of you. I'm saying, okay, if there are 4 people who was linked to war crimes at that time, and if the US ambassador at that time had mentioned the names of these 4 individuals, why did they remain silent on Gotabaya Rajapaksa's candidacy?
No, I mean,
They shouldn't have renounced the citizenship if that was the case, if they believe that he's found guilty of war crimes.
he was not found guilty of war crimes.
Yeah,
That was an
I said
accusation.
if.
Accusation made by the US ambassador in Colombo, right? I mean, as far as I know, I believe no country can accuse Sri Lankan armed forces of
Right.
deliberately killing Tamil people, because in the UK Parliament, on the basis of British High Commission records, wartime records, they have said 40,000 people did not die.
Right. Shamindra, in the event the government believes that this UN sessions in Geneva is a farce, they're not doing their job, why can't the Sri Lankan government completely withdraw from the United Nations? We have countries like Turkmenistan, which is not involved with any international body. They're a self-sufficient nation. Then we have countries like Maldives, which withdrew from the Commonwealth. So the Sri Lankan government too, if it's so steadfast about their position, why not withdraw from the UN sessions in Geneva?
I don't advise at all. Absolutely not.
And why so?
Why should we? Because few countries got together. I mean, Shamir, India started this, right? Now nobody is demanding accountability on the part of India. No, Trump is there today, right? Right? They caused the problem. In the process, they lost their prime minister, Rajiv Gandhi. He was killed by Sri Lankan terrorists, right? Then Sri Lankan terrorists raided the Maldives. They almost killed the Maldivian president, right? So the world, I believe, must look at this problem. And with the greatest difficulty, our former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, and thanks to General Fonseca, they raised the LTT. And now, in this case, the winning party is asked to explain war crimes and various other things, whereas the Tamil National Alliance, which recognized the LTT as the sole representatives of the Tamil-speaking people, are demanding accountability. You know, this is a funny situation now. Coming parliamentary polls also, the TNA will work with the UNP, right? During the 2018 constitutional crisis, the TNA and the JVP stood by the UNP. That's the truth.
They stood by the constitution. They stood by the constitution, not they stood against the violation of the constitution by the president. You can't say that it's by the UNP.
The President Sudarshana,
President has violated the constitution.
in terms of the
Supreme Court has,
constitution, in
decided
terms
that.
of the constitution, had the right
President
to dissolve
President Maithripala has violated the constitution by dissolving the parliament.
Right, I think that argument can be made, that it's something you can say, but you look at the track record of the JVP and the TNA with respect to parliamentary politics and the presidential election, parliamentary elections, they have stood with the United National Party. We have to agree to that.
Presidential election, no. I mean, if you look at I think I don't have to represent any of these parties, but here, on 2015 January, there was agreement to field a common candidate. And that point, actually, all the parties got together. Still
That agreement, that particular agreement, Sudarshana, was first reached in 2010. That was the same agreement to field General Fonseca. The same agreement, same people.
Sorry, Shamindra,
Yes,
can
sir.
I butt in? We've been talking and talking and talking. This government have been, various governments, various officials been talking since 2009 after the end of the war and so on, when the narrative shifted against Sri Lanka. But if we were to cut to the chase, doesn't Sri Lanka have a moral if nothing else, a moral obligation to find out the exact number. Is it 40,000? Is it 22,000 as I think the Paranagama report says? Is it 7,000 as suggested by the International Red Cross? Or 7,000 as suggested by the Sri Lankan government when they did a census? Or is it nearly 4,000, 3,900 something as suggested by the International Red Cross? What is it?
So I think for us, the government of Sri Lanka and the international community, the UN agencies must work together to reach consensus on the number of people dead. Because some of the people categorized as missing or dead are living overseas. Now, one example was Mr. Kumar Gunaratnam. He was issued a passport by the Australian government. He was called Noel Mudalege, a Sinhala Buddhist, right? So like that, I can give you a number of other names, people who have been issued.
But isn't the problem also compounded by the fact that all these Western governments have thus far refused to give the right numbers of the people who've emigrated illegally or otherwise and granted permission to live and take up new lives in their countries?
Actually for us, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, I must tell you, in Sudarshan is aware, in an interview with a South Indian television station, when he was repeatedly asked about missing people and the number of people dead, he was angry, and Mr. Wickremesinghe pointed out either they are dead in battle or living overseas. Unfortunately, the UPFA government, President Rajapaksa's government, his team did not pick up this issue, and they could have used it to prove that is exactly what Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe said.
But I think the underlying question is, doesn't the Sri Lankan government have at least a moral obligation to at least let the people, the families and the friends of people who were killed, who are missing, to find out the right number, and so we can move forward instead of dwelling in the past, as in fact we are doing now?
For us, it is not only the responsibility of the Sri Lankan government, right? The foreign governments, the Canada, Germany, the Western Europe, other nations must help us to find out the number of people who received citizenship there. How many? See, in UK, Tamils of Sri Lankan origin are elected to various political bodies.
Yes,
Why?
that's
Because
the
there
other
are so
point.
many Tamils living there for us.
Because there are around 22 constituencies around in and around London, Greater London,
Exactly.
that the ethnic vote makes the difference. So with
So
all
they must
this,
help us.
well, yes, but it doesn't sort of augur well when this government appears to be sort of postponing what eventually will be the inevitable. We must come to terms with it and come to an agreement and say, look, X amount of people are dead, missing, like Ranil Wickremesinghe said about some of the people being held when he was asked by, I think, one of the foreign channels. He said they're most probably dead. So let's move ahead. Let's pay them reparations. Let's tender an apology and move ahead, because we can't forever and a day live in the past.
No, for us, you must also understand, we must establish the circumstances under which these people died. Now see, there are about 20 to 30 Sri Lankan Tamils who were killed by the Indian security forces after the LTT killed Gandhi, right? Now, then the Sri Lankan Tamils raided Maldives. The Indians entered Maldives and killed Sri Lankan Tamils. So some members of the Tamil group who were returning from the Maldives to Sri Lanka in a ship. That ship was sunk by the Indian security forces.
But as a citizen,
for us, so many people, so many Tamils.
No, for us, but why should, people can go missing in different ways.
yes, so that's...
One is they can go to another country. One is they can get killed in crossfire. One is they can be killed, there could be extrajudicial killings, right? The possibilities. And they could be killed in combat. They could die in combat and go missing, right? So I don't know whether we have to apologize to all of those.
No.
Right? But it's not necessarily the number. I think you can't tell, okay, if I lost a son, I'm not going to be happy just knowing that 7,000 or 4,000 or 20,000 had been there. I need to know
Even
what happened
one's
to my
too
son.
much. But
Right.
the point is that there isn't a real need to move ahead.
We need to
Because
move ahead.
otherwise we'll be stuck in this blessed rut
Right.
and never get anywhere.
Who is stopping us from moving ahead?
I think part of the problem, isn't it, the government of Sri Lanka?
The governments of Sri Lanka.
Yeah, the current government of the day.
Yeah,
When
I
it
don't
was
think that
the Wickramasinghe Sirisena government, it was them. When it was Mahinda, it was him. And now it's Gota. Unfortunately, he's going to have to bear the cross unless he gets his act together and moves forward.
I don't know what this government, it's up to this government to respond to that question. You should get a minister or someone on the show, right? But I read that Gotabaya Rajapaksa, president, had said that we have to assume that people are dead.
Yes.
He mentioned that. As to how many died, it's hard to do
Well, it's hard to do it because the other governments are not letting on how many of these people emigrated illegally
Exactly.
or otherwise and took up residence
So
there.
is the answer to say, this is the numbers that we have, we don't know how many have gone, so we assume that everyone died in the last days of the war? I think that's wrong.
For us, let me just come back into this question. Actually, I agree with you that we have to have a closure. Also, we have to find out, because these are the citizens of this country who were missing. And these people, their family members need answers. So we have to have a credible mechanism to show that we care. Nobody is accusing Sri Lankan government of the issue of missing person. Basically, that, as Malind explained, that there were various instances that people got missing, mainly in the battlefield and maybe other.
No, people, it's not that nobody is accusing. There are a lot of people who are saying there was genocide, there was ethnic cleansing.
No.
Those words are used.
Those words
pretty
are
often.
used, but that's why there was a middle ground, because there was a group of people who thought that Sri Lankan government would not investigate into its own actions. Therefore, they campaigned for an international investigation. And after 2015, this resolution, actually, the middle ground got strengthened because various international governments, they supported the Sri Lankan government's initiative of its own reconciliation mechanism. Now, I would like to actually move away from this situation. Now, anyway, now that government is defeated. There's a new government, new president, and this government has said, now we are going to distance out themselves. I don't know how they are going to do that, because at the moment, Sri Lanka is a party to the resolution. And that resolution is up to March 2021. So Sri Lanka is technically part. We can say here for the benefit of local consumption, but they can even make statements there. But still, Sri Lanka as a nation, as a state, is part. Unless they negotiate, as Shamin said, with other countries and bring a counter resolution to say that Sri Lanka. So I don't see there are any effort to do that at the moment. But anyway, it's up to the government. So it's not my duty. So I'm not advising this government. So I would like to quote from the statement issued by the TGTE. TGTE is that transitional government of Tamil Eelam. That is the government in exile. I mean, nobody recognized them as a government, but they are a group. They never took part in any reconciliation mechanism in Sri Lanka. Actually, they were opposed to that, but they were sort of isolated. Now, they say in their statement, February 24th, 2020, they said, I quote, ahead of the opening of the 43rd session of the United Nations Human Rights Council on Monday, the Transitional Government of Tamil Eelam, TGTE, calls on the international community to abandon any attempt to dissociate the defunct Transitional Justice Initiative on Sri Lanka, detailed in UNHRC Resolution 30/1. Promoting reconciliation, accountability and human rights in Sri Lanka, and instead adopt a remedial justice agenda that includes referring Sri Lanka to the International Criminal Court (ICC) and referral of Sri Lanka to the International Court of Justice (ICJ) under the Convention for the Prevention of and Punishment of Crime of Genocide by a State Party of the Constitution. So there are people who actually claim for the genocide court. That was stopped, but now these people are also happy. So Sri Lankan government,
those people will be sad or happy whether we want them to or not.
Yeah,
right?
no.
Are we going to take the proxies of the LTT seriously?
No.
Seriously?
What I'm trying to say is that the previous government position was to isolate the extremist elements and try to forge a reconciliation between all communities. That worked to a certain extent, but in the general presidential
But
election,
you cannot do that by antagonizing the single issue.
you cannot do that. I
The
agree.
single is, Sudashana,
No.
your problem is, I mean your party, I mean the UNP, the problem is you must realize the single is in majority. That's the truth. I mean your party men, your ministers attack, I mean criticize Mahasangha and cause all these problems. So subsequently, they have realized.
No.
That's the truth.
Shamindra, no. My point
That's
is
the
that
truth.
I'm
No,
not
when
representing.
you say people are happy about this reconciliation mechanism, you are talking about certain elements of this whole, and they don't represent everyone.
They don't represent everyone.
Right.
That's true.
So they were happy maybe, but nothing really happened. No. What is this isolation that you're talking about? What is the isolation that was lost? What did we get because we were not
No, I mean,
isolated?
There was
What did we get?
I mean, everybody knows there was isolation in 2015 because there was
We were
impending,
isolated.
impending.
We were not liked by certain governments. That does not mean
We were
is
not
the
isolated
international
by the
community,
international
United
community.
States. No.
No, but then the Human Rights Council was not consist of US states. There were 49 member states. And
47.
Sorry, 47 member states. And Asia carries 13 members.
Right.
In
Now,
three consecutive resolutions, Sri Lankan government could not manage muster the support.
No.
That shows that majority of the countries in the council actually voted against Sri Lankan government initiative.
Sudashana, no government can accept a resolution against his own armed forces.
No.
You know that they are taking action against the army command on the basis of the Geneva resolution.
No.
They took action against General Chagikalle on the same thing.
No, that's not true.
I blame
Now
the
Germany,
previous
in Germany,
no, please. I blame those who support former President Rajapaksa for not standing by Field Marshal Fonseca. When the US denied him visa, I mean we as a nation, all political parties should have taken up that issue, and they waited till the US did the same to General Shamindra Silla to take it up. That's the whole problem.
Shamindra, I don't agree that it's because of the resolution that action was taken against army command or something.
Subsequent to the resolution,
prior to this resolution,
Sudashana, subsequent to the resolution, they have recommended a series of actions. They recommended actions against Sri Lankan security forces. They say reform Sri Lankan security forces, reduce the size of the security forces. But what right Geneva has to demand the size of the security forces?
No, Shamindra,
Nothing to do with them.
Geneva is not demanding. There's a resolution brought down by the majority of the members, and that resolution was passed on 2012.
I don't see any difference
14.
between the Geneva resolution and the Indo-Lanka Accord. It was forced on us.
We can agree to disagree on that.
Yeah.
But now there's a new chapter. I mean, there's no point of dwelling in the past because now there's a new government, and new government has the majority support, and the government is not antagonizing the majority community, so that's fine. But how you are going to actually work with the minorities? That's going to be the issue. So I wish them well. I wish the government well because it's the end of the day, Sri Lankan government. But the point is how you are going to work with the minorities, how you are going to work with the other members of the international community. That's up to the government. So my point is whether you want to get away from this resolution or not, you have to talk to other people. You have to talk to other parties. Otherwise, actually, you will be leading into international isolation. So if the government or if the support of the government or if the ideology of the government are willing to risk that, that's up to them.
But Sudarshana, the point is, when you look at the voting at the last presidential election, let's take that as an example. There were 6.9 million votes in favor of Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and majority of the votes came from the Sinhala dominant areas.
Yes.
Whereas his candidate, close candidate, Sajid Premadasa contested the elections. He got approximately 5.3 million votes. However, the dominant or the majority votes came in for him, approximately around 4.2 million from the Sinhala dominant areas.
4.4.
4.4. Yeah. Is it really worthwhile to risk this at the next election for the UNP?
No, I don't think UNP is going to risk anything because I think the opposition leader.
It seems very well. It seems that the the new alliance led by President Mahinda Rajapaksa, now Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, is playing very well to the hands of the Sinhala majority or the Sinhala dominant people in the country. Whereas it seems that the UNP is still losing the plot, sticking in onto the minority parties right now.
No, I mean, that I can't say for sure, because that UNP has been traditionally working with the minorities, and President, the opposition leader, Sajid Premadas.
No, my question is very simple.
Yeah.
Is it going to come at the cost of another losing election for the UNP? This battle that is taking place right now.
I cannot discuss in length because I am not in a decision-making process of the UNP. I work for the previous government, but I am not in any party structure, or I am not in a decision-making body or executive committee. But I can say as an observer that winning elections is something. But then after the winning, how we are going to consolidate and how we are going to actually face the challenges, that's a difficult question.
Thank you very much, Darshana. For the moment, we need to go for a short commercial break. As far as Sri Lanka is concerned, it's all about winning elections, Darshana, if you didn't know. So we're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's Face the Nation. Stay connected. Stay with us. We will be right back.
This is Newsline Live. Watch us for all the action. We ask all the questions that you want answers to.
Sunrise Melodies සතියේ සෑම දිනකම උදෑසන 5ට
අලුත්ම සින්දු උණු උණුවම වැඩි වරුස ඇත හැලුණත් නොයන ප්‍රේමෙට වගේ අලුත්ම TikToks උණු උණුවම थोड़ा रेशम लगता है थोड़ा शीशा लगता है අලුත්ම Games and Challenges උණු උණුවම මේකම බලන්න සතිය දවස් 5ම දඟරැල්ල බලන්න දඟරැල්ල සතියේ දින 5ම උදෑසන 10ට.
Good evening, welcome to Brainbusters with Slip Season 2.
27 schools across the island, 27 selected students testing their brains to win the ultimate championship, the Brainbusters with Slit Season 2.
Brainbusters with Slip, Saturday at 6:30 p.m. Night Bird, සතුදා රාත්‍රී 11:30.
Welcome back. It's the final round. This is Face the Nation. We are talking about the 30/1 resolution, which was then sponsored by the government of Sri Lanka, along with the United Kingdom, Macedonia, as well as Montenegro. Let's start off the final round with Malin Ratna, journalist. Malin, interestingly, one thing is clear now. Sri Lanka is going to withdraw from the 30/1 resolution. I'm not sure how easy it's going to be, but they will make an announcement at the sessions in Geneva about their withdrawal. What's next now?
If we don't know what's going to come, then we can't talk about what's next.
Yeah.
But since the issue of isolation was brought up,
Yeah.
now in 1987, the argument was it's a geopolitical reality. These words are tossed around without context, right? We are not living in the same world that existed 100 years ago, and we will not be living in this world 10, 20 years from now. And we cannot always be worried, to give greater weight than we should to these kinds of things, the international community. Most of the time, international community, US, UK, US and its allies, and what is their status in a new global political economic orders. That has to be, I want to flag that. Now we are talking about 30/1 in terms of the two major things, accountability and reconciliation. These things take time, and that time frame should be set by us, not by anyone else. It should be the reconciliation mechanisms should be in terms of what we want. You can't. It's like saying we want a negotiated political settlement and say it has to be federalism. That is, you already decided. Then why have a process? So what that reconciliation mechanism should be, what that endpoint should be a process. And we have the government, whichever government is in power, should have that process discussed, deliberated upon, and set and framed in a very clear, transparent manner, so we know where we are going. We can't have outsiders telling us this is what reconciliation is, this is how you should reconcile. We cannot have them telling us accountability, this is what we mean by accountability, and you better abide by it. We cannot let them force us to submit to their version of our reality, which is essentially a kind of slavery, enslavement that I don't want. And I think this government, Nadi pointed out this earlier, and I should thank you for that. Governments tend to say things because they want something else. That should not be the case, and the only safeguard against that is the alertness of the people and their readiness to stand up for what they believe, not deferring everything to the government that they voted for.
Thank you very much, Malin Ratna, a journalist. I now move to Shamindra Ferdinand, who is also a journalist. Shamindra, it's not going to be easy to withdraw from 30/1 resolution. It's going to be a difficult task. Will Sri Lanka get into isolation once again, as Sudarshana pointed out earlier?
Shamir, as you pointed out earlier, the former Foreign Minister Tilak Marapana, a former Attorney General and President of Council, very clearly pointed out in March 2019 that we could not implement this resolution due to constitutional reasons. So I think there should be a consensus between the government in power, the SLPP, and the UMP on this issue. I mean, of course, the UMP cannot agree on a party symbol. I mean, they are fighting on a daily basis to on this. I mean other matters.
That's a different story altogether.
Yeah. So leave all that out, politics out, and on this national issue, I think the entire parliament, you leave out the TNA, all the other political parties should agree on this, that you cannot take a decision in Geneva at the expense of the armed forces of this country, because over 20,000 men died, officers and men died, over 25,000 people injured, wounded in action. And I think it's the responsibility of the president, who was the former formerly of the Sri Lankan army, to do everything possible to ensure that the armed forces' interests are saved, protected. The action taken by the US against the army commander proved that similar action can be taken by other countries also. When the commander of the army cannot visit or his family cannot visit US. Obviously, similar action can be taken by the EU, right? So I think the government and the opposition leave aside all political differences. They must work together on this issue. I think the people, the electorate at the coming election should vote against those who refuse to undermine some sort of consensus among political parties to defend the armed forces in Geneva.
Thank you very much, Shamindra Ferdinando. I now move my attention finally to Sudarshana Guruvardhan, an attorney at law. Sudarshana, you have two men, one on your right and one on your left, opposing the 30/1 resolution, and you seem to be for it. Am I right?
Yes.
So you are saying that the 30/1 resolution has to go ahead?
No, I'm not going to say that. I said I supported the 30/1 and I see the merits. But my position is also these two respected colleagues that I have been working a long time, and I respect their views, even though that I take a different view, and that we tend to agree to disagree in most instances. My point is that the previous government thought that it was a good decision to work with the other countries and agree on a consensus resolution. In that resolution, there was no mention about accepting the culpability of the Sri Lankan armed forces. In fact, it says that the work done by the armed forces were specially mentioned there. But obviously that there were certain mechanisms started, but not enough. Even the High Commissioner in her report last year has mentioned there was a slow progress. There was no consensus between two leaders of the government, President and Prime Minister. So there were a lot of setbacks. Now, however, there's a mandate given by the people. So ultimately in democracy, you have to accept the people's mandate. So mandate is given to the President Rajapaksa, and he has formed a minority government. And that government in the cabinet has decided that we will not work with the resolution, and we will getting away from that. So then, this is the government's political decision. Then we have to support that. We don't want to make any obstruction to that. So
very quickly, Sudarshan, before I wrap up things for tonight as far as Face the Nation is concerned, very quickly, one question to you. Do you think this issue right now, withdrawing from the Sri Lanka-backed resolution, is going to be in the political foray in the next couple of weeks, because we know that an election is going to be announced in the first week of March as far as the parliament election is concerned? And do you think that the UNP is sitting on the wrong side of the fence in terms of this resolution, and because of this reason they might lose a few more votes at the upcoming elections?
I don't think UNP will take a position on that. I don't think UNP will go to election and say, okay, if we come to power, we will bring back the resolution. Because UNP will say, okay, it's up to you. It's up to the government to handle. Because we handle it our way.
It will be a UNP government that will be coming into power if the UNP emerges victorious. If
UNP becomes victorious, then UNP will have to find a way to handle that. Anyway, I think that we have to have a new formula, because that old formula, it has come certain way, but now there is a kind of a rejection to that formula. So UNP is also thinking about reforming itself. So therefore, I agree. If there is a consensus between major parties to agree on a system, okay, we leave the resolution, but somehow, if we are not going to abide by the international sanction program, then we'll have to have an alternative. We can't simply say, no, we are not going to do that. So, as Martin said, if we don't want something imposed, or we perceive to be imposed, then let's build something on our own. But my whole point is that we have to make sure that the minorities are also included in this process, and where there is every citizen is respected.
Thank you very much, Sudarshana. Just to give some thought to our viewers, we know that the LLRC Commission report was also tabled in Parliament, as well as it's now in the public domain. However, respective governments have been cherry-picking on the recommendations and the resolution that has been brought forward, picking and choosing what they want and what they do not want. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Thanks a lot, Martin, for joining us this evening on the show. Thanks a lot, Sudarshana, for joining us on the show tonight as well. And then Shamindra, of course. This morning I saw you on Newsline and now tonight on the show. Thank you very much, Shamindra, for joining us as always. Thanks a lot, Faraz, and thank you very much, Nadine, for joining us tonight on the show. At the end of the day, it's the people. What matters most for anyone should be the people of this country. And that should be the core and that should be the heart of all politicians. I leave you tonight with a quote as I always do. Without trust, we cannot face the difficult challenges in our world today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Take care and good night.